Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. On behalf of the Latino Law Student Association and the Institute for Legislative and Governmental Affairs, I welcome you all to this very special presentation by State Representative Juan Candelaria from the 95th House District in New Haven in Connecticut. And this is a really exciting event. I know that we all study the law, how it works, but I thought it might be interesting to learn from a lawmaker about the process of getting new bills made and how that works. And Representative Candelaria has been very successful in getting a number of very important bills passed in Connecticut. And I've known Representative Candelaria now for many years, and I've had the good fortune of working with him at the legislature on a couple of different committees, the Committee on Higher Education and also the Children's Committee. And so we're very grateful that he was able to take time away from this very busy legislative session right now in Connecticut. So without further ado, please help me welcome Representative Juan Candelaria.
Thank you, Michael. Good afternoon, buenas tardes, for those that speak Spanish. When Michael called me and invited me over to say a few words and to talk a little bit about what I've done in Connecticut and also talk a little bit of how I was formed, right? Not in the sense that you're thinking, but how I was formed to become a politician and what was instilled in me to do that. So when Michael called me, I couldn't say no. Michael was instrumental in helping me with a lot of research on many, many bills. He was by my side during many nights when I debated bills, one specifically which I debated like almost 10 hours. And Michael was there all along through those late nights, helping me, providing me the information that I needed to ensure that we were successful in passage of the bill. So let me tell you a little bit about who I am and where I come from. My name is Juan Candelaria. I am from Atillo, Puerto Rico. That's a small town in Puerto Rico. And my parents, trying to look for a better quality of life, we migrated to the US back in 1979. If you figured that out, you'll know my age. But we came to New Haven, and what we saw, we liked. It was an opportunity for us to grow, to learn, to know other communities. So this jibarito, jibarito is a countryman from Puerto Rico, we call them jibaritos, was in a strange country that has so much to offer. So going back to when I was in the island, seeing this 8-year-old boy, my father worked in the farms milking cows so that we could, sell it in the different farm markets. And coming to this strange country and seeing the potential of growth was amazing. Went through school in the New Haven public school systems, then attended college. But there was one thing that was wrong within my community. There were many issues that needed to be addressed. And I wanted to be part of that process, but I did not know how. So I engaged a local alderman to provide any type of assistance that I could in helping them clean up the neighborhood. There was a lot of drugs in the neighborhood, a lot of blighted property. And I didn't want my own children to grow up in that type of neighborhood. So I wanted to make a difference. And the way I could do that difference was by engaging in the political process. No intentions of running. So I reached out to this alderman that was there for almost 17 years. So I want to be helpful. How can I engage? How can I make this neighborhood better for everyone? And the response that you're giving me now, and you weren't there, that's the same response I got. I was totally ignored. Maybe because he was comfortable in being in the position for so long. So I said, how am I going to catch his attention? There's only one way to catch an elected official's attention, and that is by running. And that's exactly what I did. I went downtown, filed my paperwork, and I was a candidate. It was that simple. But that wasn't my purpose. So, as politicians always do, they called the meeting, and we were all in a room. Says, well, we don't need you to run right now. We'll help you be part of the process. We'll find the solutions. And I said, fine. As long as I'm engaged and I will be part of those solutions, I have no reason, no intentions in running. So that was the last conversation I had with that individual. And then 2 years passed, and I ran, and I won. And that's how I got involved in local politics. I became an alderman. Some cities call it the local council. And did a lot of changes. Increased police force within New Haven. We cleaned up the all blighted properties. And we took a lot of the families that were living in the neighborhood and helped them become homeowners. So our neighborhood, which was primarily renters, many of them became homeowners, which changed the demographics of the neighborhood, because once you own something, you appreciate it, you take care of it. So moving forward, a great friend of mine who was the state rep before I took over, he tragically died in a car accident. And I remember, and it's personal to me because the day before we were together, we were at a meeting together, and he was talking to me, but it was weird, the conversation. He was saying, Juan, get ready, because you're going to be the next state rep. I said, well, the next state rep, that's going to happen when you move to the Senate. Then I'll run. He said, no, get ready. And around 3 o'clock that morning, I got a call from a good friend of ours. He says, you know what? Johnny has passed away. And the rest is history. I ran for office, and here I've been. And trying to fill his shoes was a task. He was a Latino legislator, had done a lot of legislation around the Fatherhood Initiative, connecting fathers to their children and making sure that they were part of their lives, to the point that he took this to the national level at the National Hispanic Caucus of State Legislators, where I'm currently the treasurer right now. And what we do is we do a lot of policy at the national level that impacts all Latinos throughout the United States. So, you know, I admire you for taking this career. Going to law school is not an easy task. It requires a lot of commitment and appreciation for the law. But it's also nice to understand the other side of the process, how the bills become law. And we could read how a bill becomes a law in a textbook and assume that that will be the process. But there's more behind that. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. We have the legislative process where we come up with it either through an advocate or we see a need in the community and we draft an idea. For example, I'll talk a little bit about a bill that I did. In Connecticut, we passed a historic bill, which was drive-only license for undocumented immigrants. Now, you might say, why would I engage in that type of policy? Well, and we could debate this, but a lot has not been done at the national level to address that issue. And as local legislators, I think we have a responsibility to every constituent. And what did I do? I met with many of those immigrant communities. I took a road trip. We went throughout every state in Connecticut, every city in Connecticut, meeting families in the suburbs, in urban cities. And I thought I was going to find probably 5 people that were supportive of this type of legislation. No, there were hundreds of people hiding in those communities because they were afraid of driving, afraid of doing the simple tasks that we do on a day-to-day basis, like go grocery shopping, or take our sibling to school, or our child to school, or take our mother to the church. Those simple things they were afraid of doing because they were afraid of being caught driving, and put in prison and being deported. So imagine your worst fear and living that worst fear consistently. This is what these families were living. And that's why I became so passionate in ensuring that I find a solution to their problem. You know, I remember a story where a mother's child was testifying, and he goes, my worst nightmare is that my mother is going to be stopped by the police. She's going to be incarcerated, being deported, and I'm going to stay by myself. That was my biggest fear. And I connected with that. Because to have a loved one that may be a contributing citizen in the normal sense of the way, right? They work in our communities, they provide to our communities, they pay their taxes, because they do. Everybody pays their sales tax. And they fill out their taxes as well, but they don't get reimbursed for it. That's another conversation. So they contribute over $1 trillion to our economy. And yet they cannot have the simple ability to drive in our community. So I introduced a bill to give driver's license to undocumented immigrants. I said, this is going to be a piece of cake. We're going to get it done right away. Hold and behold, oh my God. I had people from all corners saying, wait a minute, you can't do that for immigrants. Are you crazy? I said, no, I'm not crazy. Yeah, I might be crazy sometimes, but I think my craziness in this particular situation has a rationale behind it, because we're going to generate some revenue from this. So here we're engaging in that conversation with my own colleagues. Revenue, wait a minute, how am I going to get revenue? And this is my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. Well, they'll be able to acquire their own insurance. They will get their own driver's license, which they will pay a fee on. They will be able to register their own vehicles, pay property tax on those vehicles, and who's going to benefit out of it? We will. Let me backtrack for a second, because I want to tell you another side of this, is that these individuals had the ability to register their cars with using someone else's name. Meaning, I could have said, you know what, Michael, I'll register the car under my name, but you'll have to pay my insurance as well. If you're willing to do that, we'll register, you'll be able to drive. And many people did that. There were instances where either they were involved in a car accident. I know one particular instance, the lady was involved in a car accident. Car was totaled. They reimbursed her about, the insurance paid about $12,000. The individual who registered the vehicle took the money. When she came back to claim it, I need to buy another car because I need to get to work. The person said, well, this is my money, the car is under my name, and if you continue to harass me, I'm going to call the police. And what did that person do? They were so afraid they went away. It was hearing those type of stories that really motivated me to do the bill. So as I'm talking with my colleagues and talking a little bit about the revenue piece of it, they were more interested. But then came other questions. Well, if we do this bill, are they going to be able to vote? I said, no, they're not going to be able to vote. They have an identification to drive, and it's a drive-only identification. It doesn't give them the ability to vote. I don't know. I'm afraid that could happen. Can we put something in the bill that identifies them as immigrants? I said, well, we don't want to single them out. I don't think that's fair. But I'll be willing to compromise. And how do we do that? On the back of the license, very small print, it says, drive only. So if a police officer stopped them, they'll be able to identify that was a drive only license. And in the front, in letters said DL, drive only. Our regular driver's license says DL, there says DO. So that was an identifying marker, but it wasn't as obvious. Because the last thing we want to do is pass legislation to benefit an individual, but at the same time we're punishing them by singling them out. So those changes within the legislation happened. So I had some of them convinced. So what was the next step? It was a public hearing. And we had to ensure that we get everybody's attention. So what did I do? Remember I talked about traveling? Many cities, I did that. And I met with these communities. And we held a public hearing in one of our local schools. It was the largest public hearing in the history of any bill that was heard in the Capitol. We had over 3,000 people come out in buses. We filled the school to capacity. They had to shut down the school. But I wanted to make a point to the Transportation Committee. These are the families that will be impacted. These are the families that have the need, and that we have a responsibility to provide some alternative. And that worked. We had the public hearing. The bill went directly to the floor, but it wasn't there. We still had to negotiate. We still had to negotiate with our colleagues because they were concerned. So we did the P's on the drive only on the back of the driver's license, so that worked very well. Then the other piece we had to negotiate, how are we going to fund the cost to issue these driver's licenses? So we had to find money within the budget. And how are we going to pay for it without moving resources that have been allocated just to provide services to that population? So from the fees that was generated from the license, we were able to pay for additional workers to do that. And that brought many people's attention. But then I came back again to another road, blocking the road. One of our colleagues said, well, we need to ensure that these individuals will become U.S. citizens. How can we do that? Would they be willing to file an affidavit stating that they will become U.S. citizens? Sure, I don't see why we wouldn't. I think that's the goal, to become a U.S. citizen, right? Be a productive citizen. So we worked that into the legislation. Then there's one piece of the legislation, because the law can be interpreted in many, many ways. It depends who's reading it. Exactly when you read a book. I could interpret a book in a specific way. What was the meaning of that book? What was the message of the author? Michael can interpret it in a different way. So within the language of the bill, we put in that an acceptable form of identification would be their passport, their consulate ID, and also a birth certificate, a baptismal certificate or other similar document. But we as legislators understood it, and as we have our legislation being reviewed by attorneys as well, we understood that other similar document, birth certificate, will fall under that category. So we passed the bill, becomes law. It was a nightmare because a lot of people came out of the woodwork saying signed up for the driver's license. And when many people went with their birth certificates to apply for their driver's license, they were rejected because the department interpreted other similar documents as a baptismal, either a marriage certificate. That's a similar document. So many of the people that we try to help were rejected. They were sent back home, their hopes killed because they couldn't achieve at least having the driver's license that they so aspired to. So last year, we made a fix to the law. And again, that brought up another conversation. When I passed that bill, it was a 10-hour debate. Standing there for 10 hours without a bathroom break. So imagine submitting a fix to the bill second time around. I didn't want to do it, to be honest with you. So I don't want to be up there for another maybe 5 hours. But thank God we cut it short because we negotiated before debating the bill. We engaged in negotiations, and there was something they wanted as well. It's okay, so we won't oppose your bill. We won't debate it. So don't debate out, just limit the debate. And that's how it happened. It was like 2-hour debate. We were able to fix it. So although we intended within the language of the bill to utilize birth certificates as part of the identification, what was being interpreted was something totally different. So you see, at least you get a perspective of the process. It's not an easy process where you submit a bill and it goes through committee. You know, that one went only through transportation and directly to the floor of the House. There are certain bills that go through several committees. So you have to engage every colleague in those committees, both House and Senate, because in Connecticut, the committees are chaired by a House member and a Senate member. So not only you need to convince your own colleagues, to ensure that your bill moves along the process, you have to also convince your Senate colleague to ensure that they are in favor of the bill and that they will support the bill so that we can move it along. Because the problem is, if we don't get a public hearing on a bill, the bill does not move forward. That's what it says in the textbooks, right? But the reality is you can still make that bill reappear, and I've done that many times, Many times my colleagues say, we don't like the bill, they're not gonna hear the bill. I said, okay, I'll find a way. So you could amend a bill on the floor. If there's another bill that is germane to the topic, then you could amend it with your own language. So whoever tells you, oh, you know what, I'm sorry, they didn't had a public hearing on the bill, we won't be able to pass that legislation this year, that's not true. You could always find something that's germane and amend the bill and debate it on the floor. Is that the process that we want? No, of course not. Because we want the public's input. We want the advocates' input on every legislation. Because that's how you hear from both sides. You hear the pros and you hear the cons. But unfortunately, that's not the case every time at the legislature. And you have to force certain legislations because you think it's the right policy that will impact the lives of many of the constituency that we serve. So we have to take that approach. So the other good thing I want to talk about is technology. We have so much technology at our fingertips right now to do a lot of the research that we need. I have Kenya, who's my intern. She's been very helpful. I'm working on a bill this year. We've had to do a lot of a lot of research for this particular bill. We're talking about, some may favor it, some may be against it. I have my rationales why I support it. But we want to do in Connecticut legalization of marijuana. So I introduced that bill this year, and we've done a lot of research, looking at the pros and the cons. And people might say, you know what? One, I don't think it's the right time. Yet you hear Connecticut voters are more than 60% say they support it. So I think it's the right time to engage in that conversation. As you know, Connecticut is facing a deficit. Right now it's at $277 million, and we're projecting $1 billion for next fiscal year. So how are we going to close that loophole? You know what the conversation currently is? We're going to cut 5.75% across the board on all line items. Now, we have social safety net programs that are critical to our communities. Mental health, right? Daycare. Those are things that are critical to families. Having that assistance can either make them or break them. So I offer, every time I get an opportunity, I say, well, I have a bill, I have a proposal. There's a legalized marijuana in the state of Connecticut. And then there's a bunch of debate about that. And I know that we can engage right now in another debate on your opinion on something of that nature. And we heard about Colorado, so thank God we reached out to the proponent in Colorado who passed the legislation. He agreed to come over and testify in my bill. Hopefully that will get some support, some legway. But we want to engage in the conversation and hear both sides of the story. But again, this bill didn't get a public hearing. But I forced an informational hearing where we're similar to a public hearing. I'm going to have a panel of people to come and speak and testify from both sides of the aisle. Those are pros, those are against it. Because we want to hear. We really want to get the input. Because this will be a major impact to our state if we make it into law. Of course, like I said earlier, it's informational. The bill is currently dead because the committee did not raise the bill. And I'll explain that. Basically, a bill gets referred, once I introduce the language, it gets referred to a committee of cognizance. That committee will raise the bill, and it's up to the chairs if they want to raise the bill for a public hearing. In this particular case, they did not raise the bill for a public hearing. So I met with leadership and I said, I think this is a topic, because this is my second year introducing the bill. This is a topic that merits a conversation One, because the voters are asking for it, and secondly, because we're in a financial crisis and this is a solution to the problem. That does not mean that because we legalized it, and this is my argument, I'm going to go out and smoke. I've never smoked it. Well, maybe I tried it once when I was 16. Let's be clear. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to go and smoke. I just don't do it, all right? So, we had the public hearing. We'll get a good panel of people to testify. Tonight, I'm heading over I have families that, I'm meeting with about 50 families tonight at 8 o'clock, who their children have terminal illnesses. And they want us to pass this bill. Now, you hear about a lot of health concerns. And yeah, I mean, there are some concerns. But yet, we passed medicinal marijuana to help a lot of these patients with terminal illnesses to continue to extend their life, to survive, to do their normal activity as they did in the past. So that's one of the things that's before me right now. And hopefully we'll listen to the bill. Hopefully we'll get it passed. I already identified vehicles. Remember I told you I can amend a bill on the floor? I already identified that several months ago. So at the end of the day, if I have to bring it to the floor and amend the bill, we'll do that so that we can have a serious conversation. It's funny, because I normally like to engage in conversation instead of me having people look at me and listen to me. I get bored listening to somebody for so long. So I could imagine if you feel the same way. So I'm going to engage you guys and question if you have any questions or in processes, because it's critical. There might be something that you have on top of your head that you want an answer to. But I've been in the legislation for the last 14 years, and it is a fulfilling experience. I'm honored to serve, to have the people's trust. Because when you go out there to those polls and you cast that vote, it's because you believe in that candidate, you believe in their message, and you believe that they will make a change that will impact your life. That's the reason we go out to the polls, because we feel inspired. How many of you have not been out to the polls because you don't feel inspired by the candidate? You'd rather stay home. And I know that has happened to many of you. Before I got elected, that happened to me. Now that I'm an elected official, I have to go out every time and vote, you know? Although if I say candidate I'm not too fond of, but I go out there and cast my little vote. But that's the good thing about the process. So I encourage you to engage. Engage with your local alderman. Engage with your local state rep or senator, so that you could at least intern and get that experience to understand and see how that bill becomes law. It's exciting because you'll understand the background mechanics and the politics of how that bill became a law. I know that Michael has experienced that before. And actually, as I came in today, we were talking about a little story that we in the legislature, I was president of the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus. And we were negotiating a bill which was excessive force. You've seen the news, what's been happening, police using excessive force. And we wanted a bill that held police accountable. In that bill, we included language for the use of body cameras. But our leadership did not. It was the last day of session. We were been engaging in conversations for the past month about bringing the bill to the floor, having a debate and a vote on it. But the bill was not being called. So here we are, 10 o'clock at night, I'm saying to my colleagues, they're not going to call the bill. And there's a lot of other many important bills that they want on the agenda, what we call on the goal list. All the bills we have on the list, and we call that list the goal list. There's a lot of bills on that goal list that they want. How are we going to make them listen and understand that this bill is important to my community? So what's the other option? We got a filibuster. And I know you've heard that term before. So here we have a good colleague of mine brings out a bill that penalized farmers and grocery stores if they did not post a sign stating that their products, their vegetables or fruits were organically grown in Connecticut. Great bill, right? Who doesn't want organic products from your own state? So I said, this is the opportunity. You know, we're going to utilize this bill. So I called, there's 20 of us, right? When I'm saying 20 of us in the Black and Puerto Rican caucus, Latinos and African Americans. So we all huddle. We look like a football team. We're huddling. This is what we're going to do. I said, well, you sure you talk at least, you got to talk 15 or 20 minutes. Because that's the only way they're going to pay attention. And I need everyone to touch that red button is to signal that you want to speak. Make sure that everybody touch that button. Okay, Juan, we're going to touch that button. We're going to speak for a long time. I said, okay, great. I got my colleagues' support. We're going to get this done. So I think like out of 20, like 3 of them press their button. And the first one that gets up to speak, and I'm timing them, right? If this is going to work, the only way the Speaker of the House is going to get the message is that he knows and understands that we're filibustering. First person gets up and speaks for a minute. I said, oh my God, we're dead in the water already. Then the second person passes 2 minutes. I said, oh, this is promising. Oh, we're going to filibuster this bill. Third minute, sits down. I said, oh my God, we can't continue. So what do? Like, I get up. And I was there probably, what, more than an hour? Filibustering. So the guy is talking about the bill. I said, one of my questions was, and I use Massachusetts as an example. I said, if I bring a seed from Massachusetts and I plant it in soil in Connecticut, is that organically grown? And he's looking at me like, I don't want to say what I think he was thinking. A lot of bad things, right? He's looking at me with that look like you. He says, well, yes. Well, remember, then I follow up with a question, because the seed came from a plant that was planted in Massachusetts and grown in Massachusetts. So does that technically mean that if we planted it in Connecticut, it's going to be Connecticut grown? And I kept on with those type of questions. Silly questions, right? You're like, oh, come on, why are you asking all these type of questions? Well, I achieved what I wanted. I saw the Speaker of the House. He's coming out of his office fuming, upset. I mean, he's a Caucasian man. He looked at that's red, or that's your sweater right there. And that's more like a burgundy color. Man was fuming. Comes out, into my office! And started effing all of us, right? In a nice way. And our response to that was, we, in good conscience, requested that the bill gets a proper debate. And yet, here we have 2 hours to the close of session, and you have not called the bill or given us that opportunity. So we're going to continue to filibuster and kill every bill on the goal list, and that's exactly what we did, because we killed every bill. Of course, it's like, here you're trying a good deed, right? Because you want the bill call, you want it passed, but we killed ourselves because we went to a special session. So we had to come back. But they agreed to have the bill on the agenda. And when you call a special session, you have to be specific to identify why we come into a special session. And we did. He clearly said, we're going to hear the excessive force bill. And we came to a special session and we passed the bill, and it's law today in Connecticut. So why do I tell you that story? Because I want you to get a perspective of how a bill becomes a law. It's not as simple as we think it is. It takes a lot of negotiation, building coalition within your colleagues, with advocates. It's ensuring that you have the right team with you. It's ensuring that you even speak to your opponents. Because speaking and engaging your opponents, and when I'm talking about opponents, I'm talking people that oppose the bill within who has the ability to vote for the bill, that limits the debate on the bill, moves the legislation forward, and you can get it passed into law. So I want to end it with that. It's been like 40 minutes, so I want to end with that and open it up if you have any questions, any concerns, or anything I can address for you. Yes?
I was wondering why you decided to contact a representative from Colorado to talk about medical marijuana when other states such as Washington, D.C. have implemented it in a much less problematic way.
Okay. Because I have a relationship with that rep. Happens to be Latino. So, many of the legislature are currently in session right now, and I know that taking time to visit another state is hardly impossible to do. But I have a direct relationship with him because I'm the treasurer at the national level for the National Hispanic Caucus, the state legislator, and I had my intern give him a call, then I follow up with my own personal call. And that's why he's coming over. But he's actually the proponent, although that's been more controversial. He was a proponent, so he'll provide us with we'll look at different aspects of, the pros and the cons and understanding what he would do differently today, knowing what the impact of that legislation was. So we'll get a better insight on that. Yeah. Michael.
So, any of my colleagues here, fellow students, are, still in their early 20s, from 1 through 23. I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit, age-wise, about some of the other fellow public officials, public servants at different levels, municipal and state levels, who you have seen making a difference at younger ages, and if you could give them specifics.
Definitely. I mean, we all heard this. Age is just a number, right? It really is. I'll tell you, I'm 45. I feel like 15. Yeah, right. But I've seen, right now we have one of our colleagues, Baumgartner, Representative Baumgartner. He's actually turned 21, now he's legal. And, but he came in with a lot of energy and enthusiasm to represent his district. So many of us, what we do with new colleagues, we take them under our wings and try to show them the process. Because let me tell you this, it took me a long time to understand the process. I thought I was going to change the world when I walked into that legislature. Hold and behold, it was a totally different story. I had to build relationships. So the same thing with Michael, same thing with Baumgartner. We had to show him the ropes and understand the process. And he has become very effective. Because there's two things you could do. Either you could listen to the advice or ignore it, right? You have that option. And he chose to listen. And he has been very effective in introducing legislation, in securing funding for his district. Because one of the key things is that when we cut that piece of the pie within the budget, we got to ensure that we deliver. I sit on the appropriations committee. I've been on that committee for the last 14 years. That's where the money is, right? And you want to be where the money is if you want to be successful in delivering, because that will ensure that there's dollars for education that will go to the local budgets. There's dollars to fix the roads. There's dollars for property tax that will go within the budget just for that. So Baumgartner was very effective in doing that, and he achieved a lot. Many good legislation. And there's this other one that I mentored when he was 16. And you met him, Michael. Joseph Rodriguez. Now he's deputy director for Senator Blumenthal in the state of Connecticut. Took him under my wing when he was 16 and helped them to get involved in local politics. And when I be getting involved is going door to door on election season, talking about the behalf of the candidate, helping on election day pull out the vote. Because one of the things, if you live in urban cities, most likely you have to do a GOTV operation, which is, go and get out the vote. Where we have to hire drivers and pullers, people that will go and knock on the doors, get them in the car. You're not like, yeah, I've seen that before. Especially in minority communities, it's a fact. We have to pull out the vote. Except when we had the presidential election for Obama. People, they went to the polls. We didn't have to get them. They were at the polls. But when there were smaller elections, local elections, people are not enthusiastic about local elections. They care about the national elections. That's what gets people excited. So that's how I got them involved. And I encourage you to do that. Just call your local representative and get involved in their campaign. Because having the opportunity to go door to door and listen to the voters and their opinions and what they think about the process is very amazing. Some of us call us, well, you guys don't do anything. But there is a lot of the processes that go behind the scenes that many of our constituency are not aware of. And he got involved and he became alderman, representing a district, we call them wards, within my district. And from there, he moved on, worked for the mayor, and now he works for the U.S. Senator. So we've seen a lot of young, talented people move up the ranks because of getting involved in the process. So if you have the opportunity to do that, I encourage it. It will be an experience that you will never forget. You will meet a lot of great people, and you will make a lot of great connections. Because whatever you think about politics, you can hate politics, but politics is something that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. Even when we discipline our children, it's all politics. Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you again. Special thank you to Representative Candelaria. I also would like to thank Professor Wolf, who is our academic advisor, and Awilda Cardona and Amy Feliciano for helping to put this wonderful event together. I invite anyone who has questions to come and any off-the-record questions, come and speak with the representative, and thank you all very much for taking time out of your day to come and hear Representative Candelaria speak. Thank you.